Part 3 of session 83. Let's talk about the body prior and after the veil. Let's begin. As you might already know, Don has been really interested in the conditions before the veil, as he seems to think that this is going to provide good information for him to understand the process of third density in our current state post-veil, and a lot of the questions are in that regard. I have to say that I personally find not much information that is useful in terms of how to process catalysts and how to live catalysts. There's always, of course, a tangential value that exists in understanding how things worked in the past or prior to the veil. But I do find it a bit bleak's not the word. It's just not enough information and not enough practical things in there. But we'll do what we can with this information and see what we can get out. If anything, this material also has the possibility of us going into a mental journey of how things work and worked in the past. And one of the things that I love doing about this, and I will explain, is how the model of consciousness only fits here, because that is, if we're talking about, which is really what this last part of the session seems to be oriented towards, is the mechanics of the creation, of the physical creation. Might as well, instead of think about it as matter or energy, we think about it as consciousness, because consciousness is the only thing that really exists. Matter is a sort of perception that we get out of the perception of division, or perception in general. Perception is division. So from that regard, I think I can be helpful and hopefully paint a good image. But yeah, in terms of how, which is what Don wanted to know, how to understand better third density and our purpose and everything else, I tend to find marginal information only. But let's pick up from where we left last session, which was, I think I covered 17. Yeah, so we'll go to 18. That's the next question. There we go. Question 18, Don says, specifically, by what process in the first case, when two polarized entities would attempt to penetrate the veil, whether they be positively or negatively polarized, specifically by what technique would they penetrate the veil? Let me give, actually I should have finished with question 18 in the last video. So let me summarize what Ra said in question 17, and it was about how to penetrate the veil, right? What did Don ask? Yeah, so Ra has said in question 16 that there was the possibility of penetration of the veil due to the interaction of polarized entities working together. And so Don wanted to know a little bit more, and Ra said that there are two things. One is that there is an extreme potential of polarization in a relationship of two people who seek together, whether that be in the positive or the negative path. And then there is the doubling effect, which is the more people who are together in a session of seeking, or for example, if you get together to meditate, or you live in a group or a society or a whole civilization, that has a doubling effect. And we've talked about that, so I won't get into those details. But those are the two things, right? So that's what Don is asking here. Specifically, by what process in the first case, when two people seek together and attempt to penetrate the veil, what technique would they use to penetrate the veil? So this is actually pretty good information, I have to say. It's the rest that gets into more of the body and how it was prior to the veil that I was saying in the introduction. So this is valuable information. So let's get to it. Penetration of the veil. Ra says the penetration of the veil may be seen to begin to have its roots in the gestation of green ray activity, that all compassionate love which demands no return. If this path is followed, the higher energy centers shall be activated and crystallized until the adept is born. Within the adept is the potential for dismantling the veil to a greater or lesser extent, that all may be seen again as one. The other self is primary catalyst in this particular path to the piercing of the veil, if you would call it that. So I'm going to spend a good amount of time here because this is very valuable, actually. So I was actually reading, believe it or not, I had not read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, and I was reading the book, and I'm actually at the section where, this is very synchronistic actually, where he's explaining the relationships. If you have read The Power of Now, refer to the section where he talks about relationships for spiritual development or something like that. I have the book open on my Kindle, so I can probably take a look at it. But yeah, it's all about this bringing the relationship to the level of consciousness, of awareness. And Ra is talking about that mechanism here. What happens? How do we penetrate the veil? So I also have my own experience with Julie, which is something that I explained in the last video to a degree. And I can speak anecdotally about this. And I also want to mention something that I said before, and it's that it doesn't have to be a romantic relationship. And that's a funny thing because as we went through our process, me and Julie, we were sitting one day and we were thinking about, what are we? Like, what do we tell people we are? You're not my girlfriend, my friend, my wife. Like, you seem to be everything and nothing at the same time. Like, no word describes this at this point. Especially because we have family or friend couples who still define themselves as, you know, sort of owning each other without using the word, of course, because that would reveal the reality behind their relationship. It's just it's something good, you know. If you're a seeker and you're open to this, it's good that you realize that you have this sort of attachment, passionate attachment, I would call it, to the other person. So again, this paragraph summarizes everything, and I'll get to that. But let's first talk about the landscape here. In a relationship, and I said it doesn't have to be a romantic relationship with just anybody. It can be your friend, it could be your brother or sister or parents. It could be, as long as you're doing this together and you have obviously a relationship. And the thing is that romantic relationships tend to be the strongest because we seek those relationships out of the biggest scarcity. It's almost like they seem to reunite all those things that are missing in me. So there are great mirrors. So I'm just going to talk about that, but let me say that people in general are the mirrors, and romantic relationships are probably the best, and why they will accelerate this process. Now there's a couple of scenarios here in a relationship, and again, I'm talking specifically now about romantic relationships, and that is that both are unconscious, right? which is the typical relationship that we find. This is they're both unconscious, and they may be getting into a conscious, to a degree of consciousness with each other. But to be thorough, I'm going to talk about the complete clarity, which is what I sort of, me and Julie agree together to go through that process of just complete clarity. What is going on? What is it that I miss? And that's a whole topic that I could probably do a whole series of videos on this, because it has been we're gonna reach 20 years together now. So the point is that you have to get to that point to bring out consciousness into the relationship. Let me put it in practical terms. In essence, you have to tell your other self, who is sharing this experience with you, I'm going to accept you in every possible way. So you be whatever you want to be, and all the catalysts that I feel I am responsible for, and you're going to do the same. See, it's not an easy thing to do, but if it's done, then this will happen. Okay, so that's the situation. You have to bring consciousness, awareness to the relationship. And awareness is a synonym for acceptance. Never forget that. Awareness is also a synonym for true unconditional love, not the type of love that is selective. That's different. That is a contraction of love, and it's not pure love. So, what does Ra say about this? They say the penetration of the veil may be seen to begin to have its roots in the gestation meaning forming, cultivating, bringing, like a baby is gestating in the womb. So the gestation of the green ray activity. So the heart, opening the heart. What does the heart mean? Acceptance. What does the heart mean? Love, unconditional love, not just preference love, which is lower chakra love. In other words, limited love, not unconditional. So that is, it begins to have its roots. The penetration of the veil begins to have its roots basically on acceptance. That all compassionate love, or unconditional love, which demands no return. Meaning, you can be whoever you want, and I won't be saying, oh, you need to do this for me because you need to fill out my holes, and you are necessary for me. Don't leave me, and don't do this because I'm going to get upset. You're protecting your own development, or guarding or armoring your own development, limiting it because you just want to be satisfied with your partner being the way you want them to be. No. You have no demands in return, nothing. Okay, if that is established, then if this path is followed, says Ra, the higher energy centers shall be activated and crystallized until the adept is born. Obviously, if the heart is open, let me explain something that happens here too. If you're able to accept your partner as unconditionally, then the heart is open. See? And by the heart being open, and let me just say this too, if you have a relationship, most of your catalyst comes from him or her. If you're able to deal with that, you're healing yourself as well. Everything is happening here. Polarization is happening. All of it at the same time. All of this, obviously, makes way for the higher energy centers. That's what Ra is saying. So you open and crystallize those. They shall be activated and crystallized. Within the adept is the potential for dismantling the veil to a greater or lesser extent, that all may be seen again as one. That word oneness again is another synonym for awareness. Awareness has no discernment. Awareness simply knows. And that feeling of knowing is the same feeling of oneness. So the more you allow acceptance to be, the more you accept yourself and the other, the more you're going to accept even other people. You see, other selves. So all of this makes sense and clicks with everything that I know experientially, and that other people, like I said, Eckhart Tolle is talking about in his book, which I highly recommend if you haven't. It's one of the few books that I recommend anybody to read, honestly, because it has such a broad audience for people to assimilate, and even people who are so into complexities like this, I recommend it. Now, what does Ra finish in saying? The other self is primary catalyst in this particular path to the piercing of the veil, if you would call it that. I think I just explained this enough. The other person will be the primary catalyst in this particular path to piercing the veil. Now, here's where I'll say, and you know me by this, some people don't like when I say these things, but I'll say it anyways. This is not necessary. Some people get upset and say, oh, stop saying it's not necessary. It could be necessary for some people. So I'm not saying, don't go. I mean, I'm talking about my own experience here, right? So why would don't I want to tell people to do what I went through? Of course, that's the easiest path for me, but for teaching. But I like to play devil's advocate. It's not necessary for you to have somebody and you have a romantic relationship, because guess what? You don't need it. Period. It's not necessary. You don't need it. All you need is to know yourself. By knowing yourself, you're able to project yourself more and more on others. And then that's your catalyst. That's your mirrors. It could be other people, like I said. At the beginning of this question, I said friends, family, co-workers, whatever it is. And even ex-boyfriends, ex-girlfriends, ex-wives, ex-husbands, all of them are your universe, all your mirrors. But all right, let's move on. In question 19, Don says, what was the mechanism of the very first veiling process? I don't know if you can answer that. Would you try to, though, answer that? Ra simply says, the mechanism of the veiling between the conscious and unconscious portions of the mind was a declaration that the mind was complex. This, in turn, caused the body and the spirit to become complex. So that's pretty simple. I'll just move on. Don says, would you give me an example of a complex activity of the body that we have now and how it was not complex prior to the veil? Ra says, prior to the great experiment, a mind-body spirit was capable of controlling the pressure of blood in the vein, the beating of the organ you call the heart, the intensity of the sensation known to you as pain, and all the functions now understood to be involuntary or unconscious. So just to backtrack a little bit on the other question, the mechanism of the veil, as Ra explained, was simply the veiling of the conscious mind with the unconscious. That's what we call it now. In the past, when there was no veil, we couldn't call it unconscious. There was just one consciousness, one mindful consciousness, if you will. So that's the drawing of the veil, as I have explained several times already. I don't think I need to be redundant. But then Don wants an example of the body. So here's the thing. Ra said that once the mind was complex, meaning that it forgot, it couldn't know what was happening or why it was happening, then the body and the spirit became complex, because if the mind doesn't see, then the influx of the body's working and the influx of the spirit's reflection, let's say, or integration into the complex or the entity, it becomes veiled too. So the level of difficulty of the game has been increased. And challenge accepted, said the creator, because in the end, it's all well and good. So All right, so prior to the great experiment, which was veiling the conscious of the unconscious mind, and what a brilliant thing to do, of course, the mind-body spirit was capable of controlling basically the whole body. You see, we are able to control our breath, or so we think. At least we have that. That's why I love that they use the word involuntary, right? All the functions now understood to be involuntary, they were voluntary in the past. Now the breath, this is why the breath is so emphasized in so many practices, anything really, because you can control your breath consciously, right? You can become aware of the breath. Do it now. I know you're doing it, because otherwise you're not paying attention. You're becoming aware of your breath, and you sort of feel that, well, there's a part of me that wasn't oxygenated. And you just breathe, right? But sometimes it just seems to be involuntary. You're not paying attention and your breathing is going, right? So this is the threshold that we find and use in this path of becoming mindful of everything that's happening in your body. So now we have that, and in the past, prior to the veil, I should say, we were able to control everything else. Not anymore. You see, the mind is not able to do that, but at least the breath was part of what's left. So you can imagine now a veil or some mechanism that, you see, the mind is really controlling everything, because there's only the mind. The mind is doing the filtering of pure consciousness through a series of parameters. See, that's the mind working. That's why in the Kybalion it said, all is mind. That's the first principle. Everything in the universe is mind. Yes, of course. All is mind. The mind is what's making everything. So, the mind doing everything, if we veil the mind to specific mechanisms, then we won't be able to see how we do it. But it's doing it. The mind is beating the heart. It's not the body beating the heart. The body is perceived as something physical because the mind is filtering those patterns in that way, you see. But that's why we also say that all of this physical things that we see is illusory. It's not that I say it. Ra says it, and every other mystic in history has discovered this. Oh, everything is an illusion. It's not real. What's real is the awareness of it. That's the only thing that's real. Everything else fluctuates. It's not rooted in anything. It's like a screen depicting the movie, and everybody's pointing at the movie and say, look, it's so real. 4K, 8K, 16K, whatever it is that we're up to now. It's so knitted. It's so vivid. It's so real. It's not. Look at those CRT TVs. Oh, they don't look real. This looks real. No, none of them. Both of them are just lights flashing so fast that they make you feel that there is something in there. So yeah, that's the mind. It's perceiving all of this. And now imagine a mind that is veiled so that you're no longer aware of the breath, but the mind is doing it, and the external stimulus is causing the breathing to accelerate or decelerate. So experience is causing it, and you say, I have no control of my breath. You do. You're just not aware of it. So that is part of the veiling process. Anyhow, let's move on. Don asks here, and please bear in mind that this question is a negative. Ra is going to say no. Don says in question 21, when the veiling process originally took place, then it seems that Logos must have had a list, you might say, of those functions that would become unconscious and those that would remain consciously controlled. I am assuming that if this occurred, there was good reason for these divisions. Am I in any way correct on this? And I know where Don wants to go. Ra says no. Don says, would you correct me, please? Ra explains, There were many experiments whereby various of the functions or distortions of the body complex were veiled and others not. A large number of these experiments resulted in non-viable body complexes, or those only marginally viable. For instance, it is not a survival-oriented mechanism for the nerve receptors to blank out unconsciously any distortions towards pain. Makes sense. So again, I want you to see this as not rats in a laboratory. That's how people usually see this. When they read experiment and functions and manipulation, obviously we humans refer to the first thing we think, and that's what we do. We're projecting ourselves out there. But if you go deeper into yourself and you see, oh yes, there are no entities playing with this, it's just imagination. This is all imagination, it's a dream. Unless you buy into, of course, the idea that this is a material universe and all of this is happening, and the Anunnakis are doing this experiment. I'm sorry for the people who believe in this. I find it a little bit too shallow for the material that we have in our hands and the view of reality. There are no ETs manipulating us. The whole idea of ETs, and trust me, I went through the whole David Wilcock and Corey Good and Blue Avians and all of this, and I believed in that at first. I actually related it to the raw material and all of it. They were not the reason why I got into the Law of One. Thanks to my first guide into the spiritual path was that I got the raw material, but I found it interesting that they were talking about it. So trust me, I know the whole thing. I know all the rest of the ufologists out there that are talking about this and discovering the Garden of Eden as a supposedly experiment of Planet X or Nubian. I forget. I decided to forget all of that because it just didn't make sense to me. So again, I'm not mocking that. People believe what they want, but I think it's a little too childish at this point for me. That's how I see it. And I know it can get offensive, but in common terms, deal with it. Gotta bring humor to this. Can't take things seriously. You can't even take the raw material seriously. Take your life always with a dash of humor, and you'll never be wrong. Trust me. Okay, so yeah, no experiments from outside of consciousness. Everything is consciousness. So how can you picture this? Obviously, if anybody who has, if you're creative and you have painted or you have written stories or whatever it is, you have imagined things. You don't have to be an artist. You just imagine things, and you get really into them. You say like, oh, this doesn't make sense. I can't put this here because then it wouldn't make sense there. Imagination needs to have coherence. These are laws. You see, you can't have the hero be the villain at the same time. You can, if you're clever, but you can't do it all, just haphazardly. You have to be clever. And that's what this is being clever with what do we veil? Which functions do we veil? Ra is saying that obviously in the first experiments, the first thought experiments, they didn't work. There are things that you can't have completely unconscious. You see, not aware of my nerve receptors. You see, yeah, that's kind of stupid because we need to survive to have an experience, right? The body needs to survive. So all these things needed to be experimented. Again, experiment. I know I say this because I come from that background, and I know that a lot of people follow the raw material because although I have to say, a lot of people at this point, they stopped watching the raw material. This is I won't say well recorded, but I've heard in the past how people get into the raw material, and after session 30, 40, they're out of it because they're talking about all this mystical things that they don't care about, and I don't care about any of that. Let's talk about Atlantis and cattle mutilation, all of that. That audience already left the theater. So yeah, that's how I see it. That's how it is. But it could be Anunnakis. It's up to you to determine it, not to me. All right, let's move on. Question 23, Don says, now before the veil in Okay, now before the veil, the mind. Okay, I don't know why the now should be a comma. I think we should have a comma there. Don says, now, before the veil, the mind could blank out pain. I assumed then that the function of the pain at that time was to signal the body to assume a different configuration so that the source of the pain would leave. But then the pain could be eliminated mentally. Is that correct? And was there another function for pain prior to the veiling? So Ross says your assumption is correct. The function of pain at that time was as the warning of the fire alarm to those not smelling the smoke. So that makes sense, of course. Yeah, I suppose that you can do that. This is how I'm seeing it. Let me just reread it, because Don gets a really good point. He says, the function of the pain at that time was to signal the body to assume a different configuration so that the source of the pain would leave. Right, so touch something hot or put your hand in the fire, and you say, oh, no, thank you. But then the pain could be eliminated mentally. Right, so you could just say, oh, this doesn't hurt. And you watch your hand melt in the fire. There is no fear of, oh my God, I'm losing my hand because I know everything and I could just lose my hand and then suddenly, eventually I'll die because, oh, I don't want to use this body anymore. Like, let me get another one. So we can see a couple of things here. I'm being a little bit childish myself here, but yeah, I figured this is what would happen, right? I'm going to mention something that I heard from Sadhguru say, and I think it applies here tremendously. Was there another function for pain prior to the veiling? And Ross says your assumption is correct that yes, pain was supposed to signal the body to say, whoa, no, let's not do this. The function of pain at that time was the warning of the fire alarm, the warning of the fire alarm to those not smelling the smoke. Makes sense, yes. Pain, just like, this is the classic example. A child touches something that is hot. Pain says, okay, no more. You get that gets recorded in the mind. So Sadhguru, contemporary mystic, they were talking about pain. It was a discussion with neurologists, and they were talking about pain, and it was interesting because everybody was talking about how the mind, and you can control the mind and feeling pain and all of this. And Sadhguru says, like, pain is a very necessary thing. You have to have pain so you know what's happening in your body. He says, look at how people, and I thought it was brilliant, where he says, look at how people are piercing themselves, tattooing, mutilating themselves. Like, all of this is happening despite pain. If we didn't have so much a threshold of pain, like there's a point where you will stop mutilating yourself. He says people would be opening themselves and flinging their intestines. Always have trouble with that word. Their guts. They'll be flinging them around and just putting them back on and so on. Like, that's exactly how the veil was before. You just do everything you want with your body. Look, I'm going to show you my heart because I love you. Let me just carve. Oh, wait, pain? I can neutralize that. Here is my pain or my heart. If we didn't have pain, we would do a lot of stupid things. So pain keeps us in line with, hey, leave the body as it is, respect it, love it, feel it. By the way, I don't care about mutilation of the body myself, but people, of course, have shown that in several ways. I don't have a tattoo or a piercing. I felt kind of odd as a teenager or an adult at some point because everybody had those, and then at some point I said, you know what, I'll just leave my body as it is, and maybe it's a rare thing to find a body that is not tattooed or pierced at this point. So hey, I kind of feel special. My ego loves that. But yeah, there has to be a limit in the pain that we're willing to accept, right? But all right, that's the purpose of pain. We know that. Question 24. Don says, then let's say that an entity at that time burned its hand due to carelessness. It would immediately remove its hand from the burning object and then, in order to not feel the pain anymore, would mentally cut the pain off until healing had taken place. Is this correct? This is correct, says Ra. So, yeah, let's see what Don says. We would look at this in our present illusion as the elimination of a certain amount of catalyst that would produce an acceleration in our evolution. Is this correct? Ra says, the attitude towards pain varies from mind-body-spirit complex to mind-body-spirit complex. Your verbalization of attitude towards the distortion known as pain is one productive of helpful distortions as regards the process of evolution. I have to admit that this is a little bit confusing. Your verbalization of attitude towards the distortion known as pain is one productive or helpful distortion as regards the process of evolution. Yeah, I don't know. Let's go back so we can do honor to this question. First of all, prior to the veil, you could feel the burn. You could get your hand burned and say, oops, let me just limit the pain, no pain, and that's it. So I would basically limit the catalyst that pain would have caused me. And that is a limitation on evolution, right? So, okay, good deal. If we do that, we miss the point. But then Don says, in our present illusion, we would look at this elimination of a certain amount of catalyst, right? That would produce an acceleration in our evolution. If we would be able to eliminate it. But then Ross says, and this makes sense, the attitude towards pain varies from person to person. Your verbalization of attitude towards the distortion known as pain is one productive of helpful distortions as regard the process of evolution. Oh, I see what they mean here. So yeah, they're basically saying what you said is one of many distortions that are helpful for evolution. Period. That's it. Okay. I thought they meant something more profound. No. So yes, it is correct that pain in and of itself allows for evolution, because you say, well, I won't do that again, you see, or I'll learn my lesson. Simple. So it helps for evolution. In a very basic way, putting your hand in the fire basically teaches you self-preservation, which in turn, you may say, well, why would I want to preserve myself? You know, that's an ego survival mechanism. It's not. That is what a lot of people mistake as, since I am God, then I shouldn't care about my body. Yeah, try that. Let's see where pain leaves you. That's the ascetic view of in the past, right? No, you're supposed to have this desire to preserve the body, right? Take care of yourself. So it's basically like saying, oh, yeah, I get it. I am God, so I used to care about my body with diet and everything. I'm just going to eat fast food again and, not care about anything. Well, you try that. See, you want to preserve your body. That's a natural thing to do. So don't mistake that, please. It's not common, but I've heard people sort of insinuate that, and that is just taken out of context. So no, you want to preserve your body. And that is one helpful distortion towards evolution, of course, preserving your body, because the rest is what you learn. Okay, let's move on. Question 26, Don says, what I was trying to indicate was that the plan of the Logos in veiling the conscious from the unconscious in such a way that the pain could not so easily be controlled would have created a system of catalyst that was not previously usable. Is this generally correct? Ross says yes, so yeah, that makes sense. Question 27, Don says, now in some cases it seems that this use of catalyst is almost in a runaway condition for some entities, that they are experiencing much more pain than they can make good use of as far as catalytic nature would be concerned. Could you comment on our present condition in the illusion with respect to that particular subject? Okay, this looks promising. Ross says, this shall be the last query of this working of a full length. You may see in some cases an entity which either by pre-incarnative choice or by constant reprogramming while in incarnation has developed an esurient program of catalyst. Such an entity is quite desirous of using the catalyst and has determined, to its own satisfaction, that what you may call the large board needs to be applied to the forehead in order to obtain the attention of the self. Okay, let's first make a pause. I don't know what I usually look for these words, but I think esurient means, within context, it seems like it means a lot, right? What is this? Where are you? What does esurient mean? I use Google. I use brave, hungry, greedy. Ah, that makes sense. Yes. So, yeah, it's I would say, yeah, esurient. I think it's more appropriate to call it not hungry or greedy, but what's the word? Ambitious. Yes, very ambitious, which is not a bad thing. Ambition is not a bad thing. You want to do things, right? Oh, I see. Law-of-one.info has hungry or greedy. I think ambitious is a better synonym. Okay, so it's a very ambitious way to program yourself. Such an entity is quite desirous of using catalyst. So all of this paragraph can actually be summarized as, first of all, the question. Yes, the question is, explain to me a little bit more how in our present illusion, how this pain helps us to evolve. Yeah. And so Ra explains that in some cases, an entity will either by pre-incarnative choice, and this sounds to me like a positive entity, right? By pre-incarnative choice or by constant reprogramming of the mind while in incarnation, has a lot of catalyst, has programmed itself or allowed itself to have a lot of catalyst. Such an entity wants to use a lot of catalyst basically, and has determined to its satisfaction that what you may call the large board needs to be applied to the forehead in order to obtain the attention of the self. So a lot of this is being put in place for the entity to evolve, to process, accept all of this. So this makes sense within the spectrum of positive and negative entities, or Ra has said that the negative entities tend to program themselves very attractive physically and healthy because they don't want to deal with those things, pain and disease and all of this. That doesn't mean that they can develop those, obviously, but they plan themselves that way. Whereas the positive beings tend to program themselves with certain limitations, so they can overcome them and still, in essence, wake up. That's the whole purpose of a wanderer or somebody who has opened the heart and decided to come back. In any case, that's just what I see here. It's all about programming, but in this case, Ra's talking about those who put a lot of catalysts in their lives. It's a long answer. Actually, not so long. Ra says, in these cases, it may indeed seem a great waste of the catalyst of pain, and a distortion towards feeling the tragedy of so much pain may be experienced by the other self. However, it is well to hope that the other self is grasping that which it has gone to some trouble to offer itself That is the catalyst which it desires to use for the purpose of evolution. May we ask if there are any brief queries at this time? So, I think there's something here that I won't be able to interpret fully, and I just want to be completely honest with you. I'm just going to reread it, because in these cases where there's a lot of catalysts, says Ra, it may indeed seem a great waste of catalysts of pain. So it may seem like there is too much pain in the entity, and a distortion towards feeling the tragedy of so much pain may be experienced by the other self. So another person may look at that person who is in so much pain and disease and illness or whatever it is as something of a tragedy. What a tragedy that people are going through this. Okay. However, it is well to hope that the other self is grasping that which it has gone to some trouble to offer itself. It is well to hope that the other self, so the person who is looking at the afflicted one, is grasping that which it has gone to some trouble to offer itself. I'm not sure I get that, but what I'm getting here, and I don't think that's what Ra meant, but what I'm getting here is that it is well to hope that the other self that is looking at the person afflicted as a sort of catalyst, so to be able to help them, to offer themselves in help. I don't think that's what they're saying there, but that's what I think this scenario would be. Because imagine if you're dealing with somebody who is in so much pain, family member, friend, somebody you take care. What is there for you to do? To offer, I mean, that's catalyst for you to offer yourself to help this person, right? That's what I see. That is the catalyst which it desires to use for the purpose of evolution. Yeah, I guess that's what they're trying to say. Maybe that's what it means. But yeah, that's what I see. It is well to hope that the other self is grasping that which it has gone to some trouble to offer itself. Maybe the wording is weird, right? Because it is grasping that which has gone to some trouble, or that which has gone, which has been programmed to be a lot of trouble. Again, open to further interpretation. That's what I get here. So I usually don't cover the last question, but it was a long one. So I said, hey, why not? Plus, we have time. Don says in question 28, I notice you started the session with I communicate now. You usually use we communicate now. Is there any significance or difference with respect to that? And then, is there anything that we could do to make the instrument more comfortable or improve the contact? First, I'm bothered by the fact that I didn't put the single quote on on those in this paragraph. So if you're listening this on Spotify or everywhere else, you're not noticing this, but if you're on YouTube, you're noticing, and that bothers me. You're supposed to use one comma or quotes, inverted commas, instead of two within two. Anyhow, I know why I wanted to include this, because I thought it was funny, and it also leaves a lot to the imagination. So why do you say I am Ra? Let me go back to my face here for those of you on YouTube. Let me give you a little bit of an anecdote, because again, we have time. When I started to do the translations into Spanish of the Ra contact, for you, those of you who don't know, the Ra contact is only available in English and maybe some other languages, but it wasn't in Spanish. Spanish is a very, very huge population, and of course I speak Spanish. I do this in Spanish too, and I said, let me do this because it's a gift, for the people now and the future. So I decided to go through the Ra contact. I know what kind of project that I get into, so I got some voluntary people to help me do the initial translations, and I'll just finish rereading the whole thing. It was a whole project. I've been talking about it for a while. It's been 2 years almost, but it's finished. It's just awaiting publication. So I did notice that some people were doing the translation, direct translation, as I suggested, from DeepL in Google Translate. And it bothered me that because of that, I don't know why some people started changing at the beginning, I am Ra, to we communicate. I'm sorry. They said, I communicate now, or we communicate now. So when I was checking the translations, I noticed that people put we communicate now when Ra actually said, I communicate now. And I say, okay, it's not a big deal, but it bothers me. If in the original transcript it says, I communicate now, then it should say, me comunico ahora, which is the correct translation, not nos comunicamos, which is we. I'm very anal with this stuff, and you can see why it was a huge catalyst for me to go through these translations. In the end, that I ended up reading the whole thing like 3 times, and I'm still reading and making corrections. But I realized that catalyst is because I love doing this, so I do it happily. Now the point is that I looked it up, and then I found in this session that Don noticed it and said, hey, why do you say I communicate now, and sometimes you say we communicate now? I think it's like 20% of the time or so that they say I communicate now as a singular person, right, or as an individual. And the 80%, which is like 80 something sessions, they say we communicate now, referring to them as a whole or a group. So I noticed that, and that was funny. I liked it. And Ra is giving the explanation here, which I thought it was funny. They say, I am Ra, we am Ra. You may see the grammatical difficulties of your linguistic structure in dealing with a social memory complex. There is no distinction between the first person singular and plural in your language when pertaining to Ra. So I guess they just played with it. There's no particular reason. There's no, as Don actually thought in the beginning of the sessions, Don said, am I talking to a portion of the social memory complex or to the whole at some points? And Ra said, no, you're talking to Ra. Ra is just this, and we blend our distortions so as to give the best answer possible. So it's interesting, right? And Ra is saying here, your grammatical structure doesn't have a helpful way for us to deal with I, the singular Ra that we are, and then we're made out of parts. So again, what we call ourselves is a mind and a body. Do we call ourselves us? That would sound weird, but we can call ourselves that. We're a body complex, instead of a social memory complex, we are a body complex, or mind, body, spirit complex. But we call ourselves singular. So that's the point. It's just some funny thing that they mentioned there. Let's just finish it up saying, Ross says, we offer the following, not to infringe upon your free will, but because this instrument has specifically requested information as to its maintenance, and the support group does so at this querying. We may suggest that the instrument has 2 areas of potential distortion, both of which may be aided in the bodily sense by the ingestion of those things which seem to the instrument to be desirable. We do not suggest any hard and fast rulings of diet, although we may suggest the virtue of the liquids. The instrument has an increasing ability to sense that which will aid its bodily complex. It is being aided by affirmations and also by the light, which is the food of the density of resting. Food of the density of resting. Okay, so a couple of things here. We're talking about Carla here, so let's talk about this. Remember, this is 1982, right? We're still in 1982. Is that correct? Yes, April 5th, 1982. And Carla is still undergoing this recovery, sort of recovery from the prior sessions in, I would say, session 50 to 70 something, 75, 76. So in this recovery, diet was important, and her own mental determination energy transfer and all of this. So Ra is just giving suggestions. Only 2 things. They just mention a couple of things about her being sensitive to certain things and noticing what helps her best. That's something that we should all become aware of. I invite you to do this. You don't have to be channeling Ra to pay attention to what your body is responding to certain foods. See how you feel the next day in the morning. See how you feel after you ingest coffee, green tea, substances that you use, whether you smoke cannabis or not, CBD, all these substances, and food in general. If you eat fast food still, how do you feel? Feel good? All right, well, keep doing it. I mean, I want to say, please stop eating fast food, just because I was, for years, an advocate of nutrition, but I mean, just see what it feels like. Don't let the mind destroy what you feel in the body. But again, just consider not eating fast food. It's just terrible. So yeah, all of this is what they're suggesting. One little thing is when they say it is being aided by affirmations, which is something that does help mentalization, and also by the light, which is the food of the density of resting. That is 6th density, if you didn't notice, because she's resting in, or her mind, body, spirit complex is resting in 6th density as she channels Ra. So that is also being of help. So then they say we may ask the support group to monitor the instrument as always, so that in the case of the desire for the more complex proteins, that which is the least distorted might be offered to the bodily complex, which is indeed at this time potentially capable of greatly increased distortion. So better proteins, so more complex proteins seem to me like animal protein. So I think she was suggested to eat some meat, and there we go. Then finally they say, I am Ra. We thank you, my friends, for your continued conscientiousness in the fulfilling of your manifestation of desire to serve others. You are conscientious. The appurtenances are quite well aligned. I am Ra. I leave you, my friends, in the love and in the light of the one infinite creator. Go forth, therefore, rejoicing merrily in the power and in the peace of the one infinite creator. Adonai. I don't know about you, maybe it's just me being silly, but I love the fact that they said, I am Ra, I leave you, and then they say, we thank you. They mix I and we. Listen, if you haven't noticed, Ra has a very silly sense of humor. Too basic for my likes. I think it was in session 36 or so, I forget, maybe 40 something, whatever it was. I'm laughing at how stupid they are. Because they are. I failed to get that cosmic joke on we hope that your project for the book materializes, because I just couldn't believe that they were so simple. Like, that was so stupid. The raw material materializes. People have been explaining it over time in the comment section, and every time I read it, I just, part of me says like, no, come on, their sense of humor must be a little bit. No, they're not. All right, they're terrible at making jokes, so please stop. Oh my god, really? What a pun. That was so stupid, but it makes me laugh now. All right, I guess you're funny, Ra. Funny like a clown. Funny how? Get the quotes, get the reference, then you're a good fella. All right, conclusions. So we finished this session mostly talking about the body. I want to go back to the part that I said it was the most helpful, which was this relationship. Whether you are in a relationship or not, look at the catalyst that you have in front of you. You accepting the other person is your biggest catalyst. And again, whether you're in a relationship or not, it could be your parents, it could be your siblings, it could be your own children, actually. It doesn't matter what kind of relationship you are in. And if you live alone, notice who you're attracted to, meaning it doesn't have to be a physical attraction, so to speak, but just attracted to mentally, spiritually, whatever it is, right? And see what catalysts they're bringing to you. What are the things that you want to change in them? Why can't you accept them the way they are? And if that's not even enough, then look at the, what makes up your life and your mind. These governments, they need to come down because blah, blah, blah. Oh, that's your catalyst, my friend. Keep going. Everything is your catalyst as long as you want to control it, change it, manipulate it, or something like that, because it doesn't fit your little bubble. Yes, I know. You have to. I'm sorry. You have to challenge all your beliefs. Do it. You'll thank me later. And it's all about accepting the other. It's not, okay, I'm just going to accept others. Try it. A part of you is going to say, wait, that means that I need to accept that behavior? Yes. And it's not just, in Spanish, I don't think it translates directly. These are called false friends. Resignation? Deference? I don't know if that actually translates well. Go along with? Yeah, it's not about going along with it. It's about you seeing that you have no objection. That's the thing. Acceptance is about having no objections. It's not about just saying, oh yeah, I accept everything. I am forcing myself to accept and I am resignating myself to it or going along with it. No, you don't. You don't go along with it. It goes through you. See, that's the difference. So, yes, that is my suggestion. That is my advice. Acceptance is checking within you that you don't have any resistance to it. That's the difficulty, you see, that you have no resistance. You don't have to show it to the other person. Like, you don't have to express it. You just have to become it. That is pure presence, pure awareness, being there, knowing that that's who you are. That's all I got today. Thank you, as usual, for following me on this path with the Law of One. Again, if you want to support me, I keep saying it, please consider supporting me on Patreon, which is my platform where you can go and get a little extra perks here and there. And the more people that are there, the more things we can do. So, hey, consider joining. I want to thank all the people that also support me here on YouTube. I appreciate it. And that's it. I have nothing else to say. Oh, description box has all the links as usual. We have only 13 more sessions to cover, and that's it. But that's still going to take me months and months, so we still have more material. Thank you again. Be well. Do what you want. Let others judge you. Don't judge yourself. And I'll see you in session 84.